Ladies and gentlemen, it's great pleasure and privilege to be with you today, and I'm very sorry indeed to have interrupted the panel discussion, which I was enjoying very much. So if you could resume, I'm going to make my speech shorter so that you could resume. I would like to thank Phil as well for your very kind invitation, and to congratulate you for this, for your team and for such an event. Here you have a slide on International SOS. Be reassured, it's the only one. So you're not going to be aggressed by a number of charts and slides. And, but what I must say is that we are absolutely delighted to be part of the exclusive Top Employer UK 2019 group, because attracting and retaining the best talents in the labor market is, of course, vital for us as it is for anyone else. And we clearly are using this award in anything we do to attract new talent to the company. And also the feedback that I received from the team which worked with the Institute was superb. So thank you again. It's, and clearly I really think that for any company to be benchmarked is critical. So to be benchmarked and to succeed at being benchmarked is even better. Functions of HR professionals, to me, are absolutely critical. I mean, in the development of International SOS, I've seen that the importance of our HR function has grown year on year. And it's, so actually, the larger a company gets, the more important it is, I believe, because the more removed people are from senior management. And therefore, you need very, very strong HR organization to create this bridge and make sure that the company's culture is carried through, no matter what the size of the company is. And anyone who under-delivers on HR has a knock-on effect on one's bottom line. So, but I must admit as well that HR is a very complex profession because you are an advocate of employees at the same time as you have to help management run the company. And your role is, of course, to make sure that employees are treated fairly and equitably, but the needs of the business are balanced with the needs of the employees. So regarding International SOS that I co-founded now quite a few years ago, unfortunately, in 1985 in Singapore, what do? We help organizations to develop, grow, and protect human capital at work. So in a nutshell, our real job is that we are in the business of saving lives and protecting our clients' global workforces from health and security threats. And our growth and development has been completely interconnected with the growth of globalization. The underlying trend has been foreign direct investment, since our job is to deal with the mobile workforce. So I would say that International SOS is very much the child of globalization. Our mission is to make international mobility safer anywhere in the world. And we do that thanks to our 1,400 full-time physicians who deliver medical expertise on call or on the ground 24/7, and also to our more than 200 security professionals who come from various backgrounds around the world, from intelligence agencies, defense forces, NGOs. And what's remarkable with security professionals is that it is actually a small community around the world looking very much alike and knowing each other across countries. It's quite fascinating. So Phil asked me if I could share my experience on how to lead a diverse transnational workforce in order to sustain business growth. Just before starting, I would say that globalization is, of course, not news to any one of you. But the extent of globalization may not have been really understood. I'll give you just one example, General Electric. When we started to work with General Electric more than 20 years ago, 2/3 of their employees were in the US and Canada. And then today, it is only 1/3. 2/3 of GE is outside of the US. So in 20 years, a change which is quite remarkable. And you see it across the board with all large companies. Many other factors there that you could see. Foreign direct investment has been multiplied in 30 years by a factor of 30, from 50 billion to 1.45 trillion today. And of course, even though you have trade wars that we can all read in the newspapers every day, FDI keeps increasing and will keep increasing. And therefore, we will have to deal with larger and larger international workforces. The PwC said that 1 employee in 7 to 8 is an international traveler every year. So it's, in other words, 1/8 of the global workforce is traveling internationally. So it has become now a huge subset. So mobility has become the norm. It is increasing, and so, of course, are the risks. So what do we see from our international SOS perspective attached to it? That, of course, demands on preventative and emergency services increase more and more. We see also that there is a rapid evolution of the regulatory environment, in particular, the demand on companies to provide an active duty of care. And thirdly, companies are really now trying to demonstrate that they look at their employees no longer as a cost, but as their most valuable asset. And it has to go from what has always been the talk to make sure that there is real action behind it. So in our case, we have been dealing with an international workforce from day one. Why? Because we created, together with Dr. Raham, we created the business in Singapore. And Singapore, some of you may know Singapore. It is a terrific place, but it is tiny. So when you start a business in Singapore, you have to go cross-border very, very quickly if you want to make a living. So we had this a bit of a unique experience where we could not develop a domestic model, which most companies do, with a very large number of local employees, and then replicate this model around the world. In our case, we had to go cross-border the very first day we started operations. So we had to work with employees of all kinds of nationalities from the very first day. At that time in Singapore, you had, of course, a lot of British people, a lot of Australians, and a lot of Malaysian, Indonesians, and Singaporeans. And we even included a few Americans to the lot. Not the easiest one to manage. The second reason is that our mission is to provide and manage a global healthcare platform with the same high-quality standards all over the world. But in reality, and same thing on the security side for security crisis. But the reality is that healthcare is the most domestic profession that one can find. Doctors and the way medical care is approached is very unique to each country. The way the NHS functions in the UK is unique to the UK. You have no similar model in Europe, for example, most of the healthcare practices are domestically driven. And our job is to create this bridge so that from a client's perspective, it looks the same. So we have to manage this bridge so that physicians, international physicians and local physicians, can manage the local treating facilities and convince local physicians that when we talk to them, we are not there to teach them what they should be doing, but we are there to help them deal with people that they are not used to treat in the first place. So it does require a great deal of conviction and convincing, because if there is one thing that doctors are not short of, is ego. And it is true whether you deal with a cardiac surgeon in the US or a GP in Indonesia. And to convince a physician that someone else from outside the country can provide a decent piece of advice is not an easy course to follow. So our job is really to avoid conflict, because if there is a conflict, suddenly everything is stopped. And it was true 30 years ago, it has not changed. It is still true today. If we don't convince physicians around the world that what we do is helping them, we are not trying to steal a patient away from them because it is somewhat better somewhere else. It is going to be completely dysfunctional. And I will give you one example. It is in China. China, we started 3 years after the beginning of the operations of the company. China was opening up at the time. Deng Xiaoping had replaced Mao. And if you remember, even though Deng was very tiny and nobody could understand a word of what he was saying, he did change the future of China. And so in our particular case, we became the first company, the first international company to operate in China. What was our mission? Our mission was to help, a mission given by the Chinese authorities, because they really liked at the time, and still do to this day, monopolies. They wanted one foreign company to help all the foreign operators in China to access healthcare. So our job was to treat foreigners and local employees of foreign companies. That was the mission. And of course, like anything else in China, it was transfer of technology. So helping them develop the 911 system of China, which at the time was completely non-existent. It was, an ambulance was just a truck, and that's it. No medical equipment, no nothing else. So to help them develop a 911 system and create this emergency network that they needed. So what did we do? We brought in agreement with the Chinese authorities, a number of Western physicians into Beijing and Shanghai. It was terrific. It did work very, very well. Through endless discussions with the Chinese authorities and the Taiwanese authorities, we were able to manage the first 2 flights between China and the mainland. Whereas, if you remember, some of you may remember, most of you won't, in order to fly from China to Taiwan at the time, one had to go via Hong Kong. Direct flights were forbidden. So it was a long journey to fly from China to Taiwan, whereas Shanghai, Taipei is next door. So we managed to do the first 2 flights, and they used us to see what would be the reaction of the domestic population in China and in Taiwan in using medical flights to create this really massive change in the relations between China and Taiwan. And then on the 8th of August 2008, maybe the most important date for China over the past, ever since they've opened up, you had at 8 p.m. the opening of the Olympic Games. And this was the preparation of those Olympic Games took a full 4 years. Ahead of our Chinese business, we had two heads, a British man who still is there to this day, and a Singaporean, and both of them carried the torch in Beijing, which was quite interesting to see for something that China really advertised and magnified in an incredible way. So it was really a huge cross-cultural mission to get to have foreign physicians and foreign executives convincing the Chinese that we could help them. But what is quite interesting in my view is that today our mission has completely changed. What do we do today? We are escorting Chinese businesses across their international expansion and, of course, the new Silk Road journey that they are so massively involved in. And we are now trying to find Chinese physicians, Chinese nurses, Chinese security specialists that we are deploying around the world to wherever Chinese companies are operating, most particularly in Asia and in Africa. So a complete reverse of situation, but it is still always the same issue, which is creating a cross-cultural bridge. We have one more cross-cultural bridge also to work on in our company. It is to get professional security and medical specialists, and in particular physicians, to work with executives, which is even more complicated than to get an American and a British to get together. It is, I would say, nearly as complicated as getting an Englishman and a Frenchman to understand each other. A doctor, because what is the problem? For an executive, customer expectations, process, and cost are critical. For a physician, patient's needs are the only thing he's interested in, or she's interested in. And of course, both are right. Nobody is right, nobody is wrong. The problem is, how do you cohabitate those two views, which are extremely conflictual? One requires instant need, instant tools, capabilities, and resources. The other one is planning, long-term thinking, and cost-conscious. So there is no perfect solution, but and this problem is a worldwide problem. It is not linked to the healthcare system here in the UK. You have exactly the same debate along exactly the same lines everywhere in the world. It's the balance between cost and care and quality of care is a worldwide issue which can only grow in the future. It's not going to be, and it's never going to be solved. It will always be an unstable equilibrium. So what do? We create two lines of reporting. So we have all our physicians worldwide which report to one head physician. And so that they have this feeling that they globally are understood by their peers. And then the executive side is the same. So we create this dual system of power, which is complicated to manage, but is creating the most dynamic, I think, progress that we can have in this particular case. So as a consequence, we give a real premium to people who put corporate purpose and corporate values first. Because we have these unclear lines of command, we need people who value participation, teamwork very much. Maybe above specific skills, because this is what keeps the machine going. I believe as well that in today's world, it is in line with the evolution where, and it was mentioned in the panel before, more and more our world is a world of influence. The top-down approach, which was a remarkably effective approach in the past, is gone. Now it's been replaced, and I think it is going to be far more effective, actually, by people who are in charge of influencing each other without having authority. And this is, to me, the real way for organizations in the future. For us, one great unifying factor is, of course, the fact that our staff are bilingual. And the common language is English, which is, I must say that it's very hard for a Frenchman to accept it. But it is the case. So I'm still waiting for Mandarin to become the other global language. And then we will try to squeeze in French in between English and Chinese. But it's a long-term dream. So really, the unifying factor is English. And most of our staff actually, not only do they speak English and their local language, but most of them speak 3 or 4 languages. But I would say that it is an extraordinary accelerator of integration to have all people working at an appropriate level English. And in most of our meetings, and it is really something that I really enjoy, I see as many people, you have as many nationalities in the meeting as people attending the meeting in most cases. So it really is a Babel kind of tower that we can witness. And it creates tremendous dynamism and creativity. But looking forwards, what are the challenges that I see to remain a transnational and cross-cultural company? Clearly, with demographics and employments at very high levels in most countries, recruitment and retaining talent is becoming the key issue. For us, our number one risk from a business standpoint is how do we keep recruiting a skilled workforce. There is tremendous competition. So we work very hard on creating this unique value proposition so as to try to distinguish ourselves from other companies. And so we do many different things like most companies. One partnership that I really enjoy is a partnership called with ISEC. ISEC is a student organization for graduate students from across the world, and it's a student-run organization. So it's a youth-led association, and so they provide you with a multitude of curriculum vitae of students who are interested in having an international experience. And we've partnered with them 5 years ago. We've now recruited 100 ISEC interns, and we take them for a year. And out of these 100 ISECs, and we send them, they are from everywhere, and we send them everywhere. So there is absolutely no pattern to who is going where and who is coming and where people are coming from. And out of these 100 ISEC interns, more than 60% are now in permanent positions inside the company. So we see this program as a tremendous success. The only negative is that it's still a relatively light organization as far as Asia is concerned. And it's a great, it's very beneficial for us because we have all those people going into a number of our subsidiaries around the world, and we are able to get them to bring this global culture that we are trying to promote. Another aspect is also to understand the millennials. I mean, like all of you, we have to adapt to the fact that millennials have a different attitude. Their personal life is as important as the business life. And we really see, since I have the benefit of experience, you really see the shift in the last 15 to 20 years. The millennials want a real purpose in their job. It is a critical aspect. And if they are not passionate, or if you don't get them to be passionate about what they do, you don't buy their loyalty. And you have a massive wall of resistance. So I would say that older generations were all about getting the job done and getting paid for it. This new generation is getting the right job done and getting paid for it. So of course, it is a challenge, but we are trying to use what we are in order to benefit from it. And so we are really working very hard on our unique value proposition in order to attract them. And since our business is all about protecting and saving lives, clearly we are promoting this aspect of what we are in a very forceful way, so as making this as the reason for them to join us. And it works pretty well. And the second aspect that we are pushing and promoting is the fact that we are generating a lot of international assignments. Anyone starting in one country can be sent across the world. And doing so, we attract people. And secondly, again, we project the same culture across our various companies. So but it's a long it's a long work to keep adjusting to millennials, most particularly for a business like ours, which is 24/7. And it's the problem with crisis management and emergency services is that we cannot do what was proposed to me many years in Indonesia, to make it simpler to do it 5 days a week. It is a 7-day-a-week initiative. And so it creates a lot of constraints. And it's more complicated to push these constraints to this generation than it was before. We see also that another issue is for us to decide who should be running our various operating companies. You read in everywhere that it is better to have local managers running local companies. Sure enough. However, it's not as simple, because when you have a local manager, let's take Japan. If you have a local manager running your business in Japan, he is going to be very good, or she is going to be very good, because talent is plenty. But Japan is going to come first before the company. So when a crisis comes, a Japanese executive is going to think of Japan first and the group second. Whereas if you send an expatriate, you automatically have the company's culture, which is, and the company's needs, which are seen as the priority. So there is not good or bad. Of course, in the end, it's always the aim is to have as many local managers in top positions as possible, and if possible, and now having a local manager as the head because he understands the culture and the fabric of society, of course, in a much better and deeper way. But it's, I think one needs to have a very flexible approach about it and not systematic. I used to, many years ago, I had decided that all our leaders in Asia would be Asians in every single country. Now it's a much more mixed bag that we have, and it's more sustainable. So in HR, I'm always a bit skeptical with the recipe which works across the board no matter what. In another way that we've created to get people to work together. When you deal with consulting firms, for example, they always tell you that they have operations around the world, and so they can deal with your problem in a very simple way because they are going to assemble teams from many different locations. The reality 9 times out of 10 is that they don't work together. They work in silos, and they don't know how to share experiences. It is the most complicated thing in the world to get people from different countries or different operating units, and it is even true within one country to operate together. What we have created a few years back, and that's on the business development side, is what we call a cross-border incentive. So what's the point? The point is, for us, everything is interactive. We need, when a client is buying our programs, Roche, for example, they want to access our services worldwide. It doesn't matter where, and they want to access these services in exactly the same way around the world. And so it needs to be interactive. We need to have the people in Switzerland, the people in, let's say, if the case is in Kenya, working together, following the same protocols. And we have to make sure that they will accept to work together and influence each other. On the sales side, we need to be sure that our guys in the US are going to be interested to service Roche, even though Roche is a Swiss company serviced by our Swiss subsidiary. And so what we have created is a cross-border incentive so that whenever one is involved in another territory, it gets a reward. And this reward is not at the expense of the first one, which we had in the first place, and then it didn't work. It is now completely extra accounting, and it is at corporate level, an award which is generated by the corporate office to the entity which has helped. And it has no impact on the entity which is selling the services. And this has created a remarkable cooperation among our sales teams around the world. So now they see an interest in servicing a client everywhere in the world, even though this client is not their client, their direct one. So it's a number of mechanisms, I believe, which can be useful to manage these cross-border issues. Lastly, I would say that innovation, technology, and diversity are critical to manage global workforces. Innovation, because now innovation is everywhere. Innovation, of course, we know started in the Silicon Valley in a larger way, but it is everywhere. The UK is particularly good on the IT side in Europe. I think the UK is by a long way the most advanced in terms of startups and unicorns and digital developments. But it is a global phenomenon. Singapore, China, Israel are now very, very good. And so what do? We are trying to, because innovation is at the heart of what we do, technology, in our case, communications, data and health are changing at a very fast pace. We are trying to assemble multicultural teams so as to benefit from innovation and innovative capabilities in the various locations in which we work. And so this is true for innovation. We do it also on the diversity side. Globally, we have roughly a bit more women than men in our workforce, 55-45, and at management level as well. But like many companies, when we get to the most senior levels, then we see unbalanced. So we are promoting diversity, but what is interesting to me is that we see that in some specialties, now it's becoming very balanced. Security is one example. Our security department, 10 years ago, was, I would say, 99% men. Now, the new recruits that we have are more than 50% women. And we see in the security circles more and more women at a very, very high level coming in. So it shows that there is less and less activities which are either women's activities or men's activities. To me, this what we see, what we witness in our security department is very interesting in this regard. So we are pushing diversity very, very much because I see it as a critical success factor to recruit and retain, to talk to our clients, and also because it is the good of society and therefore the good for us. Lastly, we need to resemble our customers. I told you at the very beginning that 2/3 of GE's employees are outside of the US. If you want to talk to a Chinese employee of GE, you're going to be better off if you have Chinese employees talking to them. If you want to be dealing with Indians, it is better to have Indians. If you take continental Europe, I mean, it's fascinating, even though continental Europe supposedly is somewhat unified, you are going to be so much more successful when you align nationalities and with customers. So if you resemble your customer, you do achieve better results. And so this is clearly one thing that we are doing at our professionals level as well as our executives level. So all in all, I'd say that for us, this cross-cultural aspect is part of our fabric. We've recently developed, over the last 3 years, very specific universities. We do that with Singapore Management University. So we do it in Singapore, where we send our professionals for a week or 2 weeks at a time every year to work together on these cross-cultural issues and to try to understand each other and to try to understand our customers' issues at the same time. And I've seen tremendous results resulting from these 2 weeks of getting people from all over the world together with external professors and specific curriculum designed to achieve this. So it's a journey. It's never going to be good enough. It is always going to be extraordinarily complicated to get people from different countries in different locations working together. It's never going to be a given. It's an aim, but the companies which do it better than the others are going to be more successful. Thank you.
Arnaud, thank you very much. We've had some great questions coming in. We'll just
Thank you.
take a couple of minutes. I'm going to try and blend a few questions together because there are 1 or 2 similar ones, and also there's just not enough time. We've only got about 4 or 5 minutes. But one question which I really like was, leading such a diverse organisation with presence across the world, how do you ensure that the country and culture focus stays, and at the same time you can align by bringing in other best practices from other countries? So how does the company ensure there's no sort of conflict in that sense?
It is very complicated. For example, I mean, the values in Europe and in the US or in Australia are transparency. Yeah. If you bring full transparency to a completely developing environment, you create a lot of conflict. Yeah. So I do believe that best practice needs to be transferred from one country to the other, but it cannot be done in a blind way. Yeah. The specificity, I don't believe that you treat Japanese the same way you treat an Australian staff. That's my personal belief. I know that there are very, very many people who think exactly the opposite.
Right. And who should be making those judgment calls about things? I mean, there's been one or two questions around sort of should HR own that culture, or is that your job or somebody else's job?
I think, of course, it is HR. It is definitely HR, and this is why the HR's role, I believe, keeps increasing in all companies. But it cannot be HR only. It has to be the leadership and HR. Yeah. HR is there to put in place all the mechanisms and to report all the best practices to me. And then it's a dialogue between HR specialists and management.
Right. Two questions around gender. So you were very interesting on that subject, and you talked about the security recruitment. Was that a deliberate thing that you got that over 50% balance, or was it?
In this particular case, it was not deliberate. Right. It really is that now international relations programs, which are becoming very, very popular in most universities around the world. Yeah. You have as many female students as men, which right. was not the case before.
Okay, and a related question to that is, what are you actually doing to grow women in leadership positions within your business?
We are creating specific forums, worldwide forums or regional forums, so where our managers can voluntarily participate in, so that they exchange experiences, and then also they are becoming far better at asking for promotion, because one actually of the ceilings there is that it's when a manager has to make a choice, you always satisfy someone and dissatisfy someone else. When women tend to accept not being chosen in a quieter way than men. And so from the manager's perspective, the easy way is systematically to choose the man. Right. I think it is also for women's managers to advocate that they have absolutely same capabilities, rights, and therefore also the same disagreement with management if they are not chosen in an equal way.
Right. Okay. So I think we've just about run out of time, but thank you for a fascinating talk. Arnaud, everyone. Thank you.